Folks, I want you to think back. Think back to March of 2020. Think back to that moment when Anthony Fauci walked up to a microphone and told all of us, that he was just the humble servant of the science. Just a little man in a big lab coat, following the data wherever it led. Nothing more. The most trustworthy man in America. The media said so. CNN said so. They put the man on magazine covers. They made bobblehead dolls of him. Bobblehead dolls. I am not making that up. Well, my friends, the diary has been opened, and what we are finding in those pages, in Anthony Fauci's own handwriting, in his own words, in his own private, never-meant-to-be-seen confessions, is a man who knew things he told you were false, a man who quietly claimed credit for decisions he publicly denied making. A man who, in January of 2020, was privately told by his own scientists that the coronavirus likely came from a lab, a Chinese communist lab, and who turned around and called you a conspiracy theorist for suggesting the same thing. The lockdowns, the school closures, the shuttered restaurants, the kids who lost years of learning, the small businesses that never came back, the suicides, the addiction relapses, the mental health catastrophe that we are still digging out from. That man privately took credit for all of it, and this Wednesday, Anthony Fauci sits down before the United States Senate. I have been waiting for this day for a long, long time. I'm Rick LeBow. This is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. My friends, let me set the table here properly, because this story deserves the full treatment. This is not a small story. This is not a, well, that's interesting story. This is, and I want you to understand the weight of what I am saying, this may be one of the most consequential political and public health betrayals in the history of the United States government. Anthony Fauci, the man, the myth, the legend in his own mind. We now have his diary, and the diary tells us two things that were previously the exclusive domain of, quote, right-wing conspiracy theorists. That's us, by the way. We wear that badge with honor. Two things the drive-by media spent years mocking, sneering at, and treating as evidence of mental illness. Number one, Fauci knew. In January of 2020, scientists were telling him privately that the coronavirus likely leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. His own people. And what did Fauci do? He went on television. He sat next to that podium in the White House briefing room, and he dismissed that theory. He let the media bury it. He let them destroy careers over it. Doctors who said lab leak lost their platforms. Scientists who asked uncomfortable questions got the cancel treatment. And the whole time, in that diary, Fauci is writing down what he actually believed. Now, for those of you in Rio Linda, a lab leak means the virus didn't come from somebody eating a bat at a wet market. It means it escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which happened to be doing research on coronaviruses, which happened to receive funding, and this is the part that the drive-bys really don't want to talk about, that happened to receive funding routed through a little nonprofit called EcoHealth Alliance, which was working with Fauci's own organization, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. You see why they needed to bury this? There's a word for what that would be if it all traces back the way it traces back. And that word is not pretty. And I don't want to get ahead of the evidence, but I want you to understand why there was such a massive, coordinated, institutional effort to stamp out this theory. Because if the lab leak is true, and we have more reason than ever to believe it is, then the guy standing at the podium telling you masks work and schools must close is the same guy who may have helped fund the research that started the whole catastrophe in the first place. And they called us the crazy ones. But here's what really has my previously nicotine-stained fingers fired up today. It's not just the lab leak entry. The diary also reveals, and I love this because it confirms what every person with a functioning pair of eyes already suspected. Fauci personally called the mayor of New York City and convinced him to close schools, bars, and restaurants in March of 2020. Now, here is what Fauci said publicly when asked about lockdown decisions. He said he didn't make policy. He said he was just an advisor. He said the decisions were above his pay grade. He was just a humble scientist. Don't look at him. He's just a little fella. He doesn't make the big calls. Meanwhile, in the diary, I called the mayor. Folks, that is not an advisor. That is a man running a shadow operation. That is a man who understood exactly what he was doing, which was making decisions that would ripple out to affect hundreds of millions of Americans, while maintaining plausible deniability, while maintaining the image of the selfless public servant, while making sure that if any of it went wrong, and so much of it went wrong, he would not be holding the bag. He was not following the science. He was following the cameras. Let me give you a sense of what closed in New York City in March of 2020. Schools, every single one of them, 1 million children overnight at home for months, for some of them years. The learning loss from those school closures, and this is settled, this is not controversial, even the people who supported the closures now admit it, the learning loss was staggering, particularly for kids in low-income neighborhoods, the very kids that City Hall spent its entire political existence claiming to champion. Those kids fell behind. The private school kids, the wealthy kids, they had tutors and resources and parents with flexible schedules. The kids in the Bronx and Brooklyn and Harlem, they fell behind in ways they will never fully recover from. And the man who made the call privately, took credit for it. Now, Fauci has been at this a long time. He is a survivor of the Washington bureaucratic jungle in a way that very few people ever are. The man ran NIAID since 1984. 1984! He outlasted Reagan, both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, Trump the first time. He knows how to play the game. He knows how to cultivate the press. He knows how to make himself indispensable while never being accountable. He is, in a sense, a masterpiece of the administrative state, the permanent government, the unelected class of people who actually run things regardless of who wins elections. And that is why this diary is so explosive, because for once, the mask slipped. For once, we have his actual thoughts, not the media performance, not the congressional testimony with the selective memory and the misdirection, the private thoughts. And the private thoughts say, I knew, I called, I decided, and I told you something different. I love this job, my friends. I really, truly love this job. Now, this Wednesday, the United States Senate is going to sit Dr. Fauci down and ask him questions. And I want to give the senators, the ones on our side anyway, a little free advice, courtesy of the Rush Hour Institute for Advanced Conservative Studies. Do not let him do the thing. You know the thing where he furrows the brow, tilts the head, speaks very slowly and very carefully, and says something like, well, Senator, I think what you're seeing here is a fundamental misunderstanding of the scientific process, and I want to be very clear. And then he talks for 4 minutes and says absolutely nothing. Do not let him do that. Ask him one question at a time. Make him answer it. Make him look at the diary entry. Make him explain. In plain English, not scientific jargon, not bureaucratic throat clearing, make him explain how he called the mayor of New York, helped shut down the largest city in the country, and then spent 2 years telling the American people he had no role in policy decisions. That's not a complicated question. That's a yes or no question. Did you call? Yes or no? Did you tell people publicly you didn't make these calls? Yes or no? Were you lying? Yes or no? I have zero confidence they'll actually ask it that way. Zero. Because Washington has a way of making these hearings feel very serious and very thorough while somehow managing to produce no consequences whatsoever. These guys will get up there. They'll make their little speeches disguised as questions. Fauci will dodge and weave. They'll cut to commercial. Nothing will happen. But we have the diary now. The diary doesn't dodge. The diary doesn't lawyer up. The diary just sits there in black and white saying what it says. And what it says is this: we were lied to, systematically, for years, by a man held up as the gold standard of scientific integrity, by a media that worshipped him like a secular saint, by an institutional apparatus that destroyed anyone who questioned the orthodoxy. We were lied to about where the virus came from. We were lied to about who was making the decisions. We were lied to about masks, about outdoor transmission, about the schools. And now they want us to just move on. Now the drive-by media's coverage of the diary? Minimal, careful, lots of context, lots of to be fair, very few front pages, no wolf blitzers staring gravely into the camera. Because if they cover this the way they covered every Trump sneeze for 4 years, they have to reckon with what they did. They have to reckon with calling you a liar. They have to reckon with platforming this man uncritically for half a decade while you sat in your house, lost your business, watched your kids stare at a Zoom screen. They don't want that reckoning. We do. The diary exists. The Senate hearing is Wednesday, and the all-knowing, all-sensing, all-seeing Maha Ricky will be watching every single minute of it. All right, my friends, let's go to the roundup. Got a few things I want to get to today. First up, James Comey, the former FBI director, the man who once stood before the cameras with the gravitas of a man who had just solved the Da Vinci Code and told you that Hillary Clinton was extremely careless but not criminal, which, by the way, is not how the law works, but don't worry about it. That same James Comey went on social media a while back and posted 8645. If you're wondering what that means, 86 means to get rid of. 45 was Trump's presidential number. So the former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation posted what any reasonable English speaker would read as, "Get rid of Trump." And now James Comey is in front of a judge arguing that posting 8645 is protected political speech, and the charges should be dropped. My friends. My friends, I cannot. This is the man who, during the Russia investigation, during the entire 4 years of the first Trump administration, was held up by the media as the last guardian of the rule of law. The noble, upright, principled servant of justice. The man who couldn't possibly have a political bone in his body. Jim Comey, the institutional hero. And he posted 8645 about the sitting president of the United States. And now he's claiming it's just speech, just expression, just good old American political commentary. Well, I tell you what, Jim, the next time someone on our side says something colorful about a political figure, I want you to be the very first person defending them in court. I am sure you will be absolutely consistent about this. The charges relate to whether it constitutes a true threat. Comey says no. The government says it's more complicated than that. We'll see how the judge rules. But I want to point out something that is much larger than the legal question. The FBI, under Comey, spent enormous resources investigating speech, texts, and communications by people on the right for far less. Far less. And not one of those people had the institutional weight, the legal team, the media allies, or the former director of the FBI standing in their shoes. 2 sets of rules. It's always 2 sets of rules. We know. We know and they don't care. Next item, and oh, this one is something. New York City. The new mayor, Zoran Mamdani, who swept into office on the strength of the Democratic Socialist left, who has been calling the situation in Gaza a genocide at every available microphone, who has become something of a folk hero in certain precincts of the radical left, this mayor put together an 18-person committee to advise him on judicial nominations for the city. 18 people, not one Jewish person, in New York City. In New York City, a city that is roughly 13% Jewish, a city with one of the largest Jewish populations of any city on earth. Not one Jewish person on the Judicial Advisory Committee. Jewish legal organizations are, understandably, furious. And then, and this is the part that really caps it, the Holocaust Museum stepped up. The chairman of a prominent Holocaust museum personally invited Mayor Mamdani to come visit, take a tour, and learn what the word genocide actually means, because Mamdani has been throwing that word around about Gaza with a confidence that suggests he has never actually encountered its definition in a historical context. Now, folks, I want to be very careful here because this matters. The word genocide has a specific legal and historical meaning. It was coined after the Holocaust. It refers to the systematic, intentional attempt to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The Holocaust was genocide. Rwanda was genocide. The Armenian massacre was genocide. What is happening in Gaza is a war. A brutal, terrible war, initiated when Hamas murdered 1,200 people in a single day and took hundreds more hostage. But calling it genocide in the same breath as the Holocaust is not just inaccurate, it is an obscenity. And the people now running New York City apparently agree with that framing. And they don't want any Jewish voices on the committee advising them about the courts. This is who won the New York City mayoral race. The Democrats did that. The left did that. And they will do it everywhere they can if we let them. And finally, the ICE situation, the Haitian TPS situation. For those who need the quick version, temporary protected status is a designation that allows people from certain countries to stay in the United States legally while their home country is in crisis. The designation is supposed to be temporary, in theory. In practice, it gets renewed over and over, and nobody ever goes home. The Supreme Court ruled that the administration can end it. That ruling stands. The TPS for Haitian immigrants expired. Hundreds of thousands of people are now deportable under the law, as it has been interpreted by the highest court in the land. ICE is preparing what are being called blitz operations in Ohio, in New York City, in other locations with large Haitian communities. Now, the drive-by media will cover this with the maximum possible emotional voltage. We will see crying children. We will see churches. We will see community leaders in front of cameras. And none of that is irrelevant. These are real people and real situations, and I'm not dismissing that. But here is what we say on this program. The law is the law. The Supreme Court of the United States issued a ruling. The executive branch is now enforcing it. That is, I want you to write this down, that is how the constitutional system is supposed to work. When judges we agree with issue rulings, we expect them to be enforced. We cannot then turn around and decide that rulings we find inconvenient should be ignored. There are already rogue judges, and we reported on this, who are trying to help migrants sidestep the Supreme Court ruling through procedural chicanery. That is a problem. That is a serious problem, because what those judges are saying is essentially that they, a district court judge somewhere, know better than the Supreme Court of the United States. No, that is not how this works. The border is a law enforcement issue. ICE is a law enforcement agency. They are doing what law enforcement agencies are supposed to do, which is enforce the law. If you disagree with the law, you go to Congress. That is the process. That is the American system. And we have had enough of people deciding that the system only applies when it produces the results they prefer. Folks, we are almost at the finish line here on today's program. Let me leave you with something worth carrying around for the rest of your day. The Fauci diary story is bigger than Fauci. I want you to understand that. Fauci is a character, a very colorful, very consequential character in a much larger story about what happens when you allow a permanent class of unelected experts to accumulate power without accountability. It happened with public health. It has happened in education. It has happened in finance. It has happened in foreign policy. A layer of credentialed people who are never wrong, never fired, never held responsible, and who treat your skepticism of them as evidence of your ignorance. The diary cracks that open, and once it's cracked, I want it cracked all the way open. I want the Senate to ask every question. I want every entry read into the record. I want the American people, the people who lost businesses, who buried relatives they couldn't visit, who watched their children fall behind in school, while the people making these decisions sent their own kids to private campuses. I want those American people to get the accounting they deserve. That's not vengeance. That's not partisanship. That's accountability. And accountability is what keeps free societies free. You know, I have said for a long time, and I say this with the modesty of a man sitting in the Attila the Hun chair behind a golden EIP microphone. I have said that the American people are the only adults left in the room, and I believe that now more than ever. You figured this out. A lot of you figured it out in 2020. You sat in your houses, you looked at what they were telling you, and something in your gut said, this doesn't add up. You were right. Don't ever let them tell you otherwise. Don't doubt me on this one, my friends. I'm Rick Lebo. This has been Rush Hour. Same time tomorrow, if they let us back on.